Censoring the facts turns our children into idiots. They claim it's for our safety. I'll tell you what it really is. Removing information that empowers all the citizens. The truth doesn't damage points of view that are legitimate. They're trying to change amen to amen and women. How'd we let them make praying a microaggression?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Dion's Daily Dose. Today I'm here in Candid Candidate Conversations. Try saying that 3 times fast. With Spencer England. He is local. He's from LaPorte, and he's running for Senate District 8. Correct? Yeah. Spencer's here in studio with us, which I love that because then I have absolute control. I'm just kidding. Spencer, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're from LaPorte,
yes,
right? And Senate District 8, can you give like a quick overview of kind of the area that is?
So it encompasses LaPorte County, Starke County, Marshall County, and then a little sliver of St. Joe, which would be Union Township, and there's another township next to it.
So it's a big area.
It's a big area.
Okay.
A lot of work.
Because I know we fall into Senate District 4 here in Indiana or in Michigan City, and that's kind of a really small district because it's all based on population. So it includes, going west, some of the bigger, more heavily populated areas, whereas 8 is a lot of rural areas. Wow. So there are some different concerns for that race than there would be for, say, District 4, which is mostly urban, whereas there's a ton of like farmland and stuff.
Yes, a lot.
District. Yeah. And since LaPorte County in and of itself is like the second largest county landmass wise, area wise in Indiana, it makes for a large, yeah, we're good. I forgot a light source, but I think you look good. So we're all right. So first of all, I did not know this when I was doing my initial candidate research that I look people up. I'm like, who are they? What are they running for? Let me send them an invite so they can go on the show. Through this, I learned that you're a veteran.
Yes.
I had no idea because in my opinion, it's not like out there. Some people, they run on that. That's their thing. I'm a veteran, so you should vote for me.
Of course.
And I'm like, that's an odd choice, but at the same time, I appreciated that you didn't shove it in people's faces.
Sure.
And you didn't just do your 4 and then get out. You were in for a while, weren't you?
Long time, yes.
What, like how long?
I did right about 18 years. Got early out. Had a lot of issues after 2009. After I had my second deployment in 2012, but I was overseas for almost 2 years, from 2004 to 2006, and readjustment period was quite a while. We saw a lot of that was during the elections in Iraq, and so there was a crazy stuff going on. I think the readjustment period wasn't hard on me at all, like it was a lot of guys, but I think it took a lot more time than even I kind of enveloped in my own mind. And so I got back here. I went right back to work. I didn't take any downtime to kind of resettle back in, and I think I didn't initially see any issues with that at first. And I think after a couple of years being back in the country, I kind of not as adjusted as I thought I was.
Okay.
And so I just took a little more time down to kind of get my brain settled a little more. And then I spent a lot of time in Texas with I've actually met my wife while we were in El Paso. We had met up here, and we both had already been in El Paso, and we were going back down. And so it was interesting because she was an officer and I was enlisted. Oh, wow. And so that was an interesting dynamic. Yeah. The trainers down there that I worked with, I was in a training brigade or battalion down there. It was E6 and above. So when they found out I was married to an officer, it really kind of stirred the pot a little bit.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's a thing, man, for sure. There's terms for it, but
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, what made you join the military in the first place?
It's interesting as my dad, my uncle Spencer, who I was named after, both were World War II guys.
Oh, okay.
My uncle fought all the way through Italy, got on a boat, went to one of the islands, I don't know which one, and he thought he was going home, and so that didn't work out very well. But he survived. He came back here, and the rest is history. So between that, I have 5 older brothers. One passed, and most of my older brothers, except for 1 or 2, was all military. So it just kind of came with the family. I think it was just something I've always thought, not necessarily even the service side. I'm an honest person. The typical politician is going to say, well, I wanted to serve the country. Well, I went in because I thought it was cool, and I thought I wanted to do some high-speed training, maybe get into Ranger School, something like that. And I always heard other family members talk about they wish they would have done more military-wise. So I thought, I've got the opportunity to do it. And so I jumped at every opportunity to go to schools, to get higher training education as far as the Army goes. And then 9/11 happened, and I knew I had bitten a bullet at that point, or meaning not bit a bullet, but I knew I was kind of like in deep doo-doo, meaning as far as you're not just serving stateside, you're going to go overseas. So as crazy as it was a cool opportunity. They learned a lot. I met a lot of cool people. I did a lot of cool things. Definitely broadened my horizon. You're born, you're raised in LaPorte, you're in a guard unit locally, and then all of a sudden you're on active duty. So it's crazy.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Pretty wild.
Me personally, I never got the opportunity to serve. I tried to join the Marines, but at the time that I tried to join, they weren't taking GEDs. I had just gotten my GED. So it just kind of fell by the wayside, but I have the utmost respect and always have for those who serve this country. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit. I know you're married. Do you have children?
Yep. We have 5 girls.
Okay.
Oldest
All
being
girls.
25. I know. And if you look in the camera, I still have some hair. It's just the back.
I'm still.
So we have 5 girls. One is out working. One is in Loyola right now, and in Chicago. And then we have 3 at home: a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 11-year-old.
Okay. All
and
right.
so our 15-year-old is playing varsity softball at freshman. So that's pretty cool. So she's really good. She's an amazing basketballer, and I actually have a lot of guilt because I've missed a few of her games since this is all kicked off.
Right. That's a lot of people don't understand how time consuming running for office is. It's a major undertaking. Really, you got to pause almost every aspect of your life so you can attend these pancake breakfasts and these get-togethers and meet voters and knock doors, and the list goes on and on. And that's not even talking about all the money involved in, because even if you're not running massive, ads on YouTube and billboards and all of this, every one of those pancake breakfasts adds up. Every one of these little, drives to this place and drives to that place, with gas prices, being what they are, the economy being what it is, thanks to, JB. Look, I'm just going to, I lay it out. One of the things that I find refreshing about you is there's not this, for one, you answer surveys. I ran across something on Facebook. It's I think they're called Indiana Firearms Coalition, and they release candidate videos. They're like a lot of these places who do what we, the citizens, should be doing. So I'm thankful for them. They look into the people running for office and they ask them questions. Hey, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? Much like the old NRA surveys that, and they gave you, was it 90% or 100%?
I gave me 100%.
100%. That's incredibly hard to get by the real organizations.
Yes.
NRA is something else.
They ask you specific questions down the line, and I went further when I answered the questions. It wasn't just yes, no, sponsor, co-sponsor, which is how they've got it broke down, if I remember right. It was months ago that I answered that, but I also went further because being a advocate for Second Amendment rights, I've always, even since 15, 16 years old, my brother and I used to go duck hunting. I've been always watching the laws. I paid attention when things like Ruby Ridge happened and Branch Davidians and all that. And I always knew that tyranny wasn't far off. So the only thing, when someone asked me, what is your favorite amendment in the Constitution? I said Second Amendment, because it protects every other amendment.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I've always been an advocate for that. When a lot of people didn't know, including door knocking as I'm doing, a lot of people don't know that Indiana had red flag gun laws.
Right.
So that was something that I think a lot of people were blown away on. I think there's been 23,000 views on that video now. I've gotten so much good feedback on it.
Excellent.
And, the interesting thing about it is it's not hard to, I had it, when I received it, I answered, I had it back in 15 minutes. So
Nice.
the response that I've heard from other candidates of, well, they didn't know how to send it back, or they tried and it was rejected. And I'm like, that is a cop out.
I'm going to tell you, when I ran for office, I ran for state rep twice, I ran for Congress once. During that period, I discussed with several sitting representatives, and I asked, hey, what's the best way to do these surveys? What's the best method? And I was told directly, don't do it. I said, what do you mean don't do it? Oh, because then you can be held responsible for what you put down.
Yes.
Why wouldn't that be a good thing?
That's the point, right?
That's the entire, yes, thank you. That's the entire effing point of doing these surveys, is so that we can see what you believe. And then when you don't vote like you said you would, we can go, you're full of it. Look what you filled out, right? So I just want to shout out to everybody. He took the right course and filled this out. Because the Second Amendment, especially in Indiana, we're a fairly lenient state when it comes to 2A. It's not perfect, it's far from perfect. But that's one of the critical areas, I believe, that the federal government's going to use to kind of filter down to destroy state power.
Yes, absolutely.
So we need people in office who are willing to stand up against the federal government.
Yeah. Who else do you have? Yeah.
Right. That's phenomenal. I mean, other than the local sheriff, who's the highest power around.
Yes.
I wish more county sheriffs would understand that and utilize that, but that's really our last backdrop. And so if you have a weak sheriff, you really need strong government.
Yes.
Now, I love Ron Heeg. I'm just going to shout out. I think he's doing a great job, but nobody's perfect. And unfortunately, a lot of police officers are in favor of red flag laws here in Indiana. As a matter of fact, that's why it passed, because so many police organizations were like, oh yeah, we need this. I don't mind taking away guns from people who are truly dangerous, but you have to do it according to the Constitution.
Right, exactly.
And absolutely unconstitutional. But shifting away from that for a moment, what do you think? You've been out there for a little while in your district, back and forth, talking to the people. What seems to be the biggest concern that they have currently?
Can I respond real quick to
Absolutely.
what we said
Say
about
whatever
this?
you want.
I want to say this about the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
The scariest thing to me that I've heard throughout the years, and then I will move on, but I have to address this.
Take your time.
I think Ron's a great sheriff as well.
I do.
I will tell you, and this is not specifically him. This is not him at all.
Right.
The scariest thing to me is when I've heard sheriffs say, well, if they change the law, then I'll do whatever the law says. That's a scary thing.
Yeah.
I understand
Yes,
there is a title of duty and there's a description of duty. Your duty, number one, is to the Constitution
Thank you.
and to the people.
Yes.
And if a law circumvents the Constitution, and it becomes your duty to stand up for the people, not for that specific law.
Absolutely.
And I have an issue with that.
Yeah.
And so I love it, like you said, when sheriffs will come out openly and say, we will not enforce these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I would definitely sponsor or co-sponsor a bill that states that the federal government, if they tried to ban specific items, that the federal government would have to use their own officers, not state police, not state money to enforce those laws. So I'm hoping you would have, like you have in Texas,
Right.
the state saying no and the Fed saying yes and the state saying no, and this conflict, because it makes it a lot harder for them to act. And I would like us to be a sanctuary state for the Second Amendment and for the constitutional rights of those to carry firearms. So I had no idea that the Indiana Firearms Coalition was even doing that. I didn't know they had done it.
Right.
All I did was answer the questions, and I didn't just say yes or no. I went in and I described what I would do and the reasons why. And I think that's where the issue came when it came to Joe, was that not people have watched that video and they've said, well, Joe just didn't return the survey. And I said, that's not what the video says. The video says very specifically that they contacted him via phone twice and never received a response. So to me, I heard people say this throughout this time and throughout many politicians' careers. There, and it goes for both guys. And I'm not ripping on them. I'm just stating a fact. When people say, well, they're a really nice guy, I said, the devil's a nice guy too, as long as you do whatever he says. And so you have to hold them accountable for what they did. I think it was very evident they held Wojciech accountable. And I think it was evident they held Joe accountable. And so I just wanted to make sure I put that out there, because this is not hearsay. This is not, it could be, maybe he just didn't return it.
Right.
Maybe they didn't understand what they're doing. These folks at this company at this group are very good at what they do.
Okay.
The Gun Owners of America will have a letter out here tomorrow or the next day. I'm waiting on the letter talking about the responses to their answers
really
as well.
That
That's going to be very positive. And so anyway, that's all I wanted to just make sure I reiterate that.
I have a ton of respect for GOA. I'm actually a member of Gun Owners of America, so they're far better than the NRA. Well, now here, I want to clarify something about NRA. Now that they got rid of LaPierre, maybe things will get better. But anyway, and one of them. I've heard people say, let's put it that way. I've heard people say that, well, why is there so much focus on, 2A? That seems to be the biggest, your biggest campaign thing. I received the same sort of questions. And I said, because it's fundamental to our right to defend ourselves, not only from violent criminals, but a runaway government. I mean, not far away from what we're seeing now. You have lawfare, you have, political persecution. If they can do that stuff to a president, what's to stop them from doing it to us? I don't have near the money Trump does. They come after me, it'll ruin me.
Right.
So I think the 2A is extremely important part of the conversation. And no one's record is perfect, but I have heard people express grave displeasure with Wojciech's voting record when it comes to protecting our Second Amendment rights.
I'll be, and this can sound like hearsay, but I'll be quite frank. The reason I decided to run initially, I moved, I left, I was born and raised in LaPorte.
Yeah.
Lived there for years, except when I was gone. I came back, we found a really great house in Starke County, obviously a lower tax rate, great property, 4 or 5 acres. And years ago, I had talked to Mike on the phone. And again, I don't have an issue with if I had sat down and had water with Mike or something. Yeah. That's one thing. There are fundamental differences between the two of us.
Right.
On the phone, Mike called me one night many years ago, and my wife was standing there when this happened. So it's the only evidence I have to say this, but I'm just being frank. He told me, he said, I believe that the Constitution is a living document made to be changed. And at that point, and him and I used to talk here and there, and since then we have not spoken very much, because I said, Mike, we have nothing else to talk about because you and I are completely on opposite ends of the spectrum. And so that's one of the reasons when I received a phone call and someone asked me, why don't you run against Mike? There was no Joe in the race because the state accidentally put him in a congressional race of some kind. I guess somebody was on vacation and somehow his paperwork got turned in the wrong. But anyway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, that happened. And so their main guy was on vacation. Someone that was filling in accidentally put him in the 8th congressional district race or something like to that effect. Yeah. It was just kind of a paperwork mess-up.
Paperwork.
Yeah. So what I saw the night before I left in the morning to go to Indy was there was nobody running, and I said, "All right, I'm going to run."
Yeah.
So that was a big deal for me. The second contrasting difference between Mike and I is Mike said in an open statement on 96.7 The Eagle that he believes it's the state rep or the state senator's job to go downstate and make sure he allocates and brings more money back to the people he represents. Okay. And I thought that's not true. It's your job to go downstate and make sure that they take less money from the people that you're elected to represent.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, we've watched, even under Republican majority control, a tax and spend mentality, even in our county.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why people are frustrated. So to go back to what you're asking me earlier, and you said, what do you think the biggest concern of people are? We can talk about solar. We could talk about, what the Republicans are doing as a whole, being a supermajority, and what's going on with when they had the mask mandates and all this stuff. But I think the biggest concern from most people that I've spoke with is, why are we voting in conservatives that are not voting conservative? And so
excellent question.
That's a heartfelt thing to me.
It is. And it goes to show that there are so many people that, for lack of a better term, are waking up to the deception being pulled over on us. And it's very widespread. And, I don't want to hijack the interview with what's really going on. But what I do want to do is kind of shift course a little bit. And what do you like? You're a very serious guy, but I've seen you laugh. I've seen you,
If you asked my kids, they wouldn't tell you that.
Right. I've seen you in other environments, but in your ads, you can come across as, as very serious, and you can be.
Sure.
But you're also fun loving, and you laugh. What do you like to do for fun on like a lazy Saturday if you have nothing planned?
My passion, other than, and I shouldn't say this, okay, there's three things. There's three things.
All right.
I love my wife. We have the greatest time trying different restaurants.
Okay.
And it's something that we've done. We go all over the country trying different restaurants.
Okay.
My kids, and honestly, we do a lot of home study, biblical study, and it's probably, I think, the biggest thing that I've learned to fear through the years and have reverence fear for is God. I fear sometimes when I say that people think that I might be using that just as a ploy or trying to sound cliche, but it's the truth.
Okay.
I feel like if God doesn't, if I don't hold myself responsible to God, then everything else I say has no merit.
Right.
And I also believe that all of our freedoms come from God. So truthfully, my wife and I and our kids, we love spending home time together.
Okay.
We love, going out as a family and eating out. But if you ask me what my fun thing is, it's muscle cars. And
there we go.
I do a lot of fun things like restore old cars. I buy a lot of old cars, fix them up.
Nice. Okay. Dude,
I'm into that.
Cars, like, there's just something about, especially like, what's your favorite era? Do you have a favorite like era? Like,
yeah, probably 65 to 72.
Okay.
Probably.
All right. Yeah, that's my. I'm like, some of them are just absolute, almost work of art perfection.
Yes.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Man. I mean, and especially when women generally don't get it, as far as, there are women that do, but most women tend to go, that's kind of weird, that you have such adoration for an inanimate object. No, you don't understand.
That's true.
The metal, the mechanics, it speaks to me.
I always said I was born at the wrong time. I kind of wish I was born in the 50s so that I could have enjoyed the cars of the 60s.
Right.
Because that's just, I mean, I have a lot of love for cars from the 30s on up to the late 70s. I mean, I don't really care about most of the newer cars, but that's what, if you ask me, what do you do for fun on the weekend? You probably find me in a garage, greasy wrenching.
Okay.
And actually that's where we almost went with a commercial we were going to do, because they said, well, who are you? And I was like, I like to hunt, fish, shoot, and I love working on cars. And like, we should probably go that route. And we ended up doing something a little more to kind of, open things up for everyone, more of a lighthearted thing. But that's what I love to do. But mostly time with my family. I have the best time because I know that at some point, your kids are gone, and I think spending the most amount of time, and that's been the hardest thing, is just being away. My kids are like, you're like a ghost.
Right.
That's what my wife says.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, my kids are the ones who prevented me from running again. They said, okay, come back, Dad. Like, we need you here, because it's such a huge time investment. However, One of the things that gives me hope is seeing, because you're not a politician.
No.
Have you held elected office before?
I've never held. I ran.
Other than like
no,
party, like
I have not.
Okay.
I've never held anything.
Okay.
So I don't. I'm not beholden to anyone. You know, I'm not. I don't owe anybody anything.
So I've seen. There are various politicians who have run on the whole, experience being important and what kind of experience do you have. And this is something that I've addressed before, and I think it's really important to say it now. What experience does in government, in my opinion, is the opposite of good. Because the longer you're in government, the more open to corruption you are. I'm not saying anybody, I'm not naming anybody specifically that is. I'm just saying there's a reason that the founders set up our system, and their original vision were regular citizens who went, served a term, and then swapped out. Maybe two if they were doing a phenomenal job. But they didn't include term limits initially because they had a very high opinion of the voter base.
It's true.
Is that deserved? Oh, there you're fine. So,
I think the other thing they had, Dan, was the people back then were also, let's just be honest, in my opinion, and I wouldn't say it's not factual, but I'm just going to say this for those who may doubt, but the fact is this country was founded on principles of Judeo-Christian principles. True. If you look at even like the Monument of the Forefathers, which is on Plymouth Rock, it's in a residential area. Everything points back to a creator. So the men who founded this country, even those who signed the Declaration of Independence, although there were some who may not have been Christian followers, the mindset that there was a higher power and that they were responsible as human beings to reflect that moral code and culture in their actions probably is one of the reasons they never set up term limits.
Right.
And that's why we're having to force things through law, which is never good. And it makes me fearsome. It makes me a little scared sometimes when we tend to force things, even through law. And
a lot of people, I actually wasn't aware of the monument that you're talking about until recently, because like people think about the Statue of Liberty or the Alamo or many of these other places. I would argue that the monument that you're talking about is way more important and really envisions, or I should say enshrines the vision of our forefathers and shows what they had in mind and what they expected from future generations. Do you know what it's called? I can't remember right now. The monument.
It's called the Monument of the Forefathers. It was actually built in I want to say the late 1800s. It was actually paid for 100% by Congress. And it shows a complete roadmap. It was a roadmap that was enshrined because they thought if they knew history, they said if this nation ever loses its way, this is a roadmap back to where we are. And it has to do with God, the teaching of children, what parents' roles were, the expression of our faith, and then also the judicial justice system based on morality and mercy. And so the scales are both on this. And so it is interesting you say that, because a lot of people, and I'm talking about even through door knocking, we get into deep discussions sometimes, and sometimes we stay longer than we want. But the fact is, when you mention that to people, they're like, what's the Monument of the Forefathers? And I'm like, you always wonder why they don't teach that in school.
Right.
And so for me, I am a big advocate. I actually teach a class at a homeschool co-op group that we're part of. It's called Wars of the U.S. And I started with, obviously, the Revolutionary War, how we were founded as a country. And this was something that I touched on. A lot of these kids, wanted to know more of. Yeah. And so it's interesting when you teach people, not just young people anymore, it's generational now. Right. The foundations of our country, it's almost impossible to say there was a separation of God and the state. That was never in the Constitution. The Constitution called for a separation of the state from religion, not religion from the state. And that is so easy to prove based on "In God We Trust" being written on not only statues, but money and on our halls of justice, all different things. Everything is based on Judeo-Christianity. So the idea that people say, oh, there was a separation of church and state, there was never a separation. It was there was a letter that I want to say it was Thomas Jefferson that wrote to a college, and somewhere along the line, some Supreme Court justice said, "Oh, look, he meant separation." No, what happened was we began this nation as a group of separatists who left Europe that had a top-down taught theology. That when they came here, they wanted to leave. They weren't allowed to own a Bible. They weren't allowed to preach these things. And it was only King James and his the Catholic Church was a top-down taught theology that was pushing. If you weren't allowed to read the Bible yourself, so they left. That's where the Mayflower and the Santa Marina all came in. That's where, as a kid, we learned about all that. Matter of fact, even Thanksgiving itself is a Old Testament biblical holiday, and a lot of people don't know that. It is talked about that in the Bible. So I'm not. Some people think when you talk like this, you're pushing a theocracy. I'm like, no, I'm not. But we cannot lie about where our country was founded at, because we're going to constantly do what we do in LaPorte County a lot of times, is reinvent the wheel. There's no reason to do that.
Right. So. Right. I could talk about history for hours. I love history. You're obviously very knowledgeable about what I call real history, the stuff that, the true founding of this country, and the beliefs and the motivations of those who did so and their vision. The lieutenant governor candidate, Micah Beckwith, I had him on the show, and he actually said the same exact thing.
I've heard this.
Where it was a letter from Thomas Jefferson. And I found that interesting because I didn't know that. There's other stuff that I know, but I hadn't gotten to that particular facet. And it reinforces, I believe, whether intentional or not, we don't need to go there, but there's a fatal flaw in our education system. As a state senator, if elected, you will be voting on our budget. Right now, over 50% of the entire state budget, billions of dollars, goes to public education. Are you against public education?
I'm not against public education. I'm against the results we've been seeing.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. I think most people would agree that public education, being enshrined as it is, as a necessity, is a good thing. But it's been co-opted and hijacked, and unfortunately, our students, our next generations, are not being taught the skills that they need to uphold this country and keep it focused, but more importantly, for them to succeed. Look at all the liberal arts degrees and women's studies degrees that they're working at Starbucks because the jobs don't exist.
Right.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. Bill Allison wants to know solar. Before we go there, I'm going to say a little bit, which is I am discovering that I had a very neutral stance on this whole solar thing. Private property, kind of do what you want, as long as it doesn't mess up the soil, whatever. But I'm kind of I'm changing my opinion to a more negative stance based on the things that I'm learning, because there are a lot of companies that are heavily invested in making sure that they have solar farms in our area. Now, I believe part of this comes from this new AI data center that they're building in New Carlisle, $11 billion. Let's keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, what people we've seen will do for $20, for $100. They hijack people, they rob people, they kill people for change in your pocket. $11 billion. The sky is the limit on what people can and will do for money like that. That all said, what's your take? I should say, what's your stance? Because it's a very delicate, it's not an easy answer. It's not, I'm against this, I'm against that, I'm for this.
Sure.
Because we're talking about personal property rights, but they do actually affect neighboring. And I have not confirmed the validity of this, but there are rumors and papers I've heard and seen, though I can't verify the veracity of them, that when you have a whole lot of solar panels in one area, it can indeed affect the temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like a lot of asphalt, right?
Sure.
So, balls in your court. Talk about
I
solar.
mean, here's the thing with solar. The concept of solar sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
I always put it like this. The biggest thing that I fear with solar, and I know people look at you sometimes. I said this in front of a group of people. I said, I fear another plastic bag debacle. And what I mean is, if you remember in the 90s, they said, oh, paper bags are killing trees. We got to get rid of them. Well, now you know what plastic has done to the ocean and everything else that it touches, landfills. So here's the thing with solar. I look at data. I'm a data guy. I love numbers. I love facts. The fact of the matter is solar cannot stand on its own.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Without 40% subsidies. Now, let's put that in perspective. The federal government, obviously, against what most conservatives believe, have started pushing this green thing large.
Big time.
So here's what essentially what I see. They are taking tax money, and good Lord knows so many politicians go, well, it's not state money. They're actually giving us a federal subsidy, and it's like, right, you mean tax money, because that's like our money.
Yeah.
Like if that's not my money, it's everyone's money. So stop saying it's like, it's what we call OPM, right? Other people's money.
Other people's money.
And so they very easily spend that money without a lot of thought process. And I'll tell you how it works. If someone donates $1 million to you and says, here, you can go spend whatever you want. Hopefully, if you're smart, you spend it smartly. But if people continue to do that, you're like, I can buy this. I got more coming. And so they basically essentially take your tax money, give it to somebody who's created a company, knowing that product is a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't just a failure as far as it doesn't stand alone, because I've heard a gentleman about a week ago, we did a question and answer for him over in Plymouth. And the guy said, well, oil gets subsidies. I said, oh, it does. I agree. Oh, yeah. At about 10 to 15% rate. And what is the return on investment? Okay. So the return on investment for oil is massive. Most of our jobs are based off something to do with the petroleum market. Mm-hmm. And so with solar, it's an 85% subsidy, meaning it's not subsidized 85, but out of all the subsidies, it is an 80% subsidy that goes to solar. For what return? So it's kind of like when Trump was running in 2016, he said, I have no issues with some of these new ideas, but if they're not worth it, we have to gauge basically how much are you willing to pay for what return.
Yes.
Solar it does not do well. If you look at Germany, they started their renewable energy push in 1991. As of October, they received about 18% of their energy, so to speak, from as far as their solar energy. About 18% of their total energy came from solar. What happened in October, November, December, and finally in January, the country was spending about, I want to say it was $19 billion to restart natural gas plants, and now they're looking at nuclear reactors because it's not sustainable because of brownouts and Russian oil issues.
Yes.
And so now, mind you, those numbers based on the country about the size, give or take a little, the size of Texas.
Yeah.
So our country is going to go all in, spend trillions of your dollars for an item that we know does not work.
Right.
Now, do I have an issue researching things that may come about, hydrogen? So that's fine. But we know what we have to be successful. Is it the best of the best and has no downfalls? No, there's issues with oil. We know that.
Yeah.
Without getting into the climate conspiracy, I'll just say we know for a fact we have enough oil. We have a large oil supply here. Mm-hmm. And so my thing is, we have to keep the deficit down. And as a state, we can make smarter choices. Hopefully, LaPorte County makes a smart choice and puts a moratorium in, because what's happened is, just like laws do, people find out about things that are going to be passed at the last minute, and then they want to step up.
And that's intentional.
Yes, I believe it is intentional. Yes.
I believe it's intentional.
And so many other places, because I've heard it said, Mr. Beige has said before, well, we can't do things that the state hasn't said we can do. And that's just not true.
Right.
Meaning not lawfully, but basically they haven't made that parameter for us, because there are other counties, there are other entities like Culver, even Marshall County. They have enacted, and I'm not saying Marshall has it yet, but there's areas around Marshall that are local areas that have put in these what's the word? Moratoriums,
Yeah.
right? 2 years.
Yeah.
So let's do that and then give the people time to react before we move forward. And again, I've heard it said, well, you're going to just tell people what they can and can't do on their property.
Right.
The government does that every day. Go put a landfill on your site. Go put a junkyard in your backyard and see what they do.
That's true.
Okay. So putting it through a board where you have 4, 5, 6, 7 people, whatever, that are making a decision, we need to halt, because those people are generally appointed to those positions.
Right. Which is a whole other
And it's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's just say, hey, before we push this through, let's really look at the data. Let's look at the brownouts that California is experiencing already, and we haven't got far into it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we don't want to turn into a third world country. We don't want to go so far to the left that we have forgotten to meet the requirements to live a first world country way of life like we've done for so long. And now we're going to go backwards at what cost?
Right.
That's where my issue is.
Okay. All right.
And what freedoms do you give up with that as well?
That's the thing. Every time there's major decisions to be made, and allowing or not allowing solar farms to cover LaPorte County, that's a major decision.
Yes.
It's a big deal. The vast majority, and obviously you have other counties you have to think about as well, but LaPorte County is primarily agricultural. We have tons of fields, corn primarily, but soybeans and other things. And if they're, for example, one of the most vocal proponents for this solar thing are farmers, for example, whose fields are no longer producing, right? So they're like, well, this will allow me to bring back value to the land that I own. And I understand that concern. At the same time, there are legitimate concerns for your neighbors and for the area.
Yes.
If the data showing that these massive climate differences because of large solar areas is accurate, I don't know. I'm no climate scientist, but I'm with you personally insofar as let's just put the brakes on just for a little bit so that the people have an opportunity to become as informed as possible so that we can then make an informed decision telling our representatives or our board or whomever makes the final decision. I believe it's the planning commission, again, appointed rather than elected. Yes, we want this, or no, we don't. Because I believe that something this important should be decided by we the people and not a group of appointed bureaucrats.
Yeah, there's an old saying that I think it's, I'd rather be carried by or judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Yep.
And so to me, it's rushing into a decision, rushing into a marriage, rushing into a job. It's never a good thing,
Right.
Unless it's a last-ditch effort. We're not a last-ditch effort. I've been told by numerous farmers, including one guy who's got 4,000 acres right up here in Walkerton.
Wow.
And he said, the solar guy told me, let me go back. The solar gentleman from a company said, we're paying up to about $600 an acre. And the guy that's the farmer said, they've already offered me $1,500 an acre, and I guarantee I get $2,000 an acre. Now, he's refusing to do anything. But you're exactly right. There are issues like I've had people go, how come they don't put solar things out in the desert? It seems like that gets a lot of sun. Well, it's been proven that if you line the Sahara Desert with solar farms, they would raise the temperature of the earth like 1 or 2 degrees. So there is issues there. So yes, it does increase local temperatures. There are issues with the ground. And then you have other things where I can say this because the company's already out there. The information's out there.
Yeah.
If you look at RWE, which is a company that was wanting to come into LaPorte, RWE has filed bankruptcy in Europe. They lost $16 billion. I don't remember the exact year. It was 1 or 2 years ago. And so this company, what you're seeing is you're seeing these companies lose their standing in this other country, moving over here, trying to jump on an ideal that the government's willing to give these companies money. So it's not like, this is the way I look at solar. When a solar guy comes to your house, now this is residential, he'll say, hey, Dion, I'm going to sell you this setup for your roof. You're going to make $150 a month and get free energy. And you're like, oh, it's almost too good to be true.
Right.
So let's look at it. And so here's how I challenge them. I take this happened to my brother in Florida. He said it's $34,000 or $40,000 to put this on your roof. It's $200 and some a month. You'll make X amount of money, so it won't cost you anything. So my brother said, okay, here's what I'll do. Rewrite the contract so that it doesn't cost me anything, and you keep all the residual for the rest of however long I own this home. Yeah. They wouldn't do it because it just doesn't work that way.
Right. I have heard and that's another thing. I have heard countless stories. I've seen news stories. I've talked to people directly who made the decision to have solar on their property, and then all of a sudden the company just disappears and their costs are astronomical. Or like, for example, there's this old man who passed away and his family's trying to get his house, but there's a lien on it from the solar company because in his last dying days, he had dementia and didn't pay the monthly fee. So they took his house from his kids when he passed, and he had dementia anyway. So it's a long story, but the various companies, and I'm not saying the companies here in Indiana are the same, but there are solar companies that take advantage of the old, take advantage of the infirm, the disabled. And obviously there are lots of companies that do lots of things. I'm not saying any of them are that way. But one of the ideas that I've heard as far as solar is to ensure that there's some sort of clause in there to protect the homeowner. If we do it right now, it won't be there. They're trying to put it through without any sort of protection for the landowner, anything like that. That's what I've heard. But if we get some sort of moratorium, then at least we can ensure that protection is baked in.
Well, here is where I am seeing, here's where my mindset goes. My mindset goes outside even that thought process. Mm-hmm. My mindset starts with the idea that, let's be honest about what's going on here. You have the federal government, and let's be frank, most of us on watching this show probably on a conservative basis doesn't agree with what's going on with the Green New Deal. And so what we've got people that are in government going, well, they're giving us this money, and if we don't take it, we just won't get X amount of money or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so just don't take the money. Like, why does it always the government that says, well, if we don't spend the federal money, we just won't get it? And I'm like, okay, well, if everybody did that, our taxes would probably go down. I mean, what are you talking about? So the idea that these companies aren't coming up with this funds on their own and investing it, we are giving them free money for an item that we know does not work, essentially, meaning overall. It doesn't supply us with the lifestyle that Americans want to live, which is a first-rate lifestyle. I'm not willing to sacrifice our core belief system. And so when people say, well, if we don't take that money, they're going to cut out. I said, good, then let them go. Yeah. Because we have a positive balance in Indiana. Mm-hmm. We do well fiscally. Yep. I don't care what Illinois does. I don't care what Wisconsin does or whoever else is around us that is not doing well. Let's just use Illinois. Right. They're hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. No wonder they went to dispensaries. No wonder they are going nuts for it's free money, but it's not free money. Let's not forget that. It's your money. It's my money. Mm-hmm. And it's no different than giving a drug addict your money because they're going to blow your money. That's essentially what they're doing at your children's expense, at your children's grandchildren's expense. And so I believe in the core idea that if it doesn't work, you just don't do it. I don't think the earth, we heard this, 20 years ago. If we don't do it by 2024, the earth is going to end. Well, it didn't end. And we can all have that climate discussion. But at the same time, the idea that it works, it doesn't work. And so let's just spend ourselves into oblivion. I'm against that. And I think that is what the American people, the Indiana people, the conservatives are looking for, someone to stand up and go, enough is enough. Absolutely. We are done. You're not taxing these guys anymore. Right. That's what people are wanting. And we have the same people running for office. We have the same people saying, if I get in there, I'm going to do this. And then what do? They bend the knee right to the establishment or to the, I've heard it said from many conservative or many Republicans, even in our county, well, our job's to meet in the middle. And, we have to come to an agreement. I'll work with the other side. I'm like, why are you working with the other side? We have out of 50 senators, it's 40-9 or 40-10, whatever it was 49 about a month ago because they had someone out. But we have the majority, the supermajority. Why did we mask kids? Why did we shut businesses down?
Thank you.
That is on you, Eric. Okay, Mr. Holcomb.
Absolutely.
It's not on the Democrats.
Yep.
Stand up. Put your chest out, know that you're elected, and stand for the people who elected you. Stop bending at the knee for these people.
Right.
I will never do that, ever.
Okay.
I'll fight until I have nothing else left to give. And I think that's the difference between myself and the other two. I don't think it's my job to meet in the middle. I think it's, the commercial you were talking about where I'm sitting there.
Yeah.
Someone's like, you look like the Godfather in a way. I said, that's my point. It's so bad. But I know that we're in control. So if the Democrats want something, let them come and have a seat on our side of the spectrum and say, Mr. So-and-so, and if we want to put it in the Godfather perspective, this is what I'd like to get done. Could you help me with that? Right. And if it doesn't fit the bill of the conservative voters who put you in office, that's not going to work. People love it when Trump does that. People love it when DeSantis does that. Look at Florida.
Yeah. Florida's thriving.
Exactly.
I mean,
why are we reinventing the wheel? That's my problem.
Okay, so that leads me to my next direct question. Polls are polls. We saw in 2016 Hillary 90% chance to win, right? Polls are both useful and laughable at the same time. But polls being what they are, they show that the likelihood of us losing a supermajority anytime in the very near future is slim to none. It's refreshing from my perspective to hear a conservative candidate not talk about, well, we got to meet and we have to do this, we have to do that. No, you don't. Right. You have to go and represent the district that got you elected. The people of that district are your boss. And many, unfortunately, far too many elected officials seem to forget that that's who they work for. Kind of shifting track a little bit because there's a couple of things. We're running out of time. I'm having a really good time, but there's a couple of things that I want to make sure we get to. Number one, where can people learn more about you?
So if you go to England, 4 Senate.com, everything's listed there, contact information, email, and also you can just message right there off the face or off the ad. It takes you to my Facebook page. Everything's listed there.
Okay, phenomenally.
Yes.
Let's see. Is there anything that you really, really want the voters to know about you? I'm going to run I got to run a disclaimer. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Good,
I agree with everything we talked about, but
I mean, the biggest thing for me is that I am not an inside guy. You have seen over the years, matter of fact, one of the litmus tests that I had for one of the gentlemen running for office was, where have you been the last 4 or 5 years? What have you done? I didn't like the answer. And so when someone says, well, they're going to do this, or they said they were going to do this, I'm like, I've already done that, or I've already been fighting. I as much as if you look back through Facebook or if you look through Hometown News, calling for a GOP chairman to resign, not our current one, because of his comments about Trump. The chairman of the party having the New York Times call me for an interview instead of them, it says a lot. Having Trump rallies, attending Trump rallies, and I'm not talking that I'm Trump in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is it's the fighter mentality. It's the I'm not going to when BLM came to LaPorte. I have no issue with BLM as far as their initial, like, this is why we're okay, great. The problem is, as soon as they started, they went nuts. And so when they came to LaPorte, and they had been burning cities all over, when they came to LaPorte, I had a counter protests across the street. Now, that wasn't to fight with them. That was to let them know, hey, this town is not about that. You're not doing that here.
Right.
And so when people say, I want a fighter, we want someone to represent us, guess what? I've been doing that with the school corporation. They were going to close Kingsford Heights School. The first questions I asked them was, A, B, and C, you know, and it was data questions. It's not, oh, well, I wish it wouldn't go. I really like that. It's like, okay, let's ask factual questions. Let's talk about your budget. Let's talk about, you said you're going to close the school because of this. What about this? And I asked them about their utilization rates. They said that was the initial reason that was quoted. I said, well, what's your ideal utilization rate? Well, I don't know. Okay, wait a minute. So you circumvent the responsibilities back on the person that's making those decisions or making that judgment call. So for me, it's about not only being smart, but having a backbone. And I've been proven that I have that. Some people don't like that, but the people who are conservative, who are paying $8 a gallon for orange juice now,
insane.
People who had their kids masked in school, which literally medically made no sense.
Right.
Nobody is like, almost, you were afraid to, I'm scared to go in front of the school board. The school board treating people like second-rate citizens. Now, I know Ryan is changing a lot of that. It's in the works where things are going to be, you're not going to have just a time limit. You want to come and speak. Those are great things. That's because we put the right people in office.
Agreed.
So that's what we need at the state level. And that's what they get with me. Not only have I fought for the country, I want to fight for them. I don't want big money to give me money. You know, if I win this, sure, I'm going to take Republican money because I have to win in the general.
Yeah.
But I put all my own funds up for this, except for a few outliers, a few little people giving me a few hundred, 500, 600 here and there. I'm paying for everything. And I want it that way.
Yeah.
And I think, for what I've spent, I've ran a good race. I'm getting obviously endorsements. The Indiana Republican Assembly, which is a very conservative group, endorsed me. And so, I think that's what you're getting with me as a fighter.
Okay. Yeah. And excuse me. I do want to, I have been just involved in politics when I ran for office, et cetera, starting in about 2020. And I have consistently seen you on the front lines of the big topics when it comes to this stuff. The mask mandates, the forced business closures, the issues that affect us here in LaPorte County, here in LaPorte, Michigan City area. I've consistently seen your face, your persona, your voice out there saying, hey, this is not right. Hey, this is not right. And I can't say that about anyone else in this race. I don't even know one of the individuals running. The incumbent, okay, there is one thing, we're almost out of time, but there is one thing that I want to ask you. Okay, so one of the things that I feel that the incumbent does a good job on is every month we have a breakfast at 463 GOP. It's open to all conservatives. He gives kind of a briefing as to what's going on. Would you be willing to do the same
100%.
thing if elected? Okay.
100%. And I would be enthusiastic because guess what would be happening? Conservative movements, removal of laws, not encompassing more laws.
Dear God, thank you. I'm so some of these laws need to come off the books so fast. It's not even funny.
If the thing that Jesus got mad about wasn't that the Pharisees were teaching law, it was because the Pharisees were teaching and forcing man's law. And so Jesus was like, basically, remember, he told them, he said, you're basically binding these people up. And he was mad. And people are like, see, that's why he did away with the law. That's not what he was saying. What he was saying was, you're utilizing man's law instead of my law. And so I'm big about removing restraints off people, less government, more rights, more freedoms, stop being in people's business. And as a conservative, if there are things that come down the pike, it's my job to, if there are laws going to be imposed, it should be the conservative way of moving, not moving the other way. That makes no sense for having a majority.
Okay, phenomenal. We're just about out of time, but it's been a pleasure having you. It's refreshing to, I guess, hear direct. I don't want to use the word attack on the system, but a direct acknowledgement of the problems that we face as citizens, because there are so many big machines, without getting into, the kind of deep conspiracy theory and all of that. I do that in a different show. But when I look at, for example, the overgrown power of the federal government, the overgrown power of the state government, and on down. Each of these municipalities and each of these entities has grown far, far beyond what our founding fathers ever envisioned. And now we are a handful of steps away from the precipice of tyranny. Like there are obviously things we can point to in everyday life that it's been pushed. But one last thing that I want to make sure we get in is that you have been on the front lines as a voice for conservatives for years. This isn't new for you. You didn't suddenly just pop up and say, look at me, I'm a conservative. You have 4 months of social media history that shows you're a conservative, but nothing before that kind of thing. You've been around for a long time. What people see is what they get. And I firmly believe, individually, again, personal opinion, that what you say you're going to do, which is refreshing and is hard to find. So it's been a real pleasure having you on the show.
Appreciate
and
it.
If you go through, which I'm personally rooting for you, you're not in my district, otherwise you would have my vote.
Mm-hmm.
He's just outside like I said at the beginning, it's District 4. Go visit his website, England4Senate.com, right?
Yep.
And reach out. There's still time to help before the election.
Absolutely. Could use some door knockers.
Yeah, if you don't have money, that's okay. There, in many cases, especially this close, money's not going to do a lot of good unless you want to run a bunch of ads. Door knockers, yard signs, people to spread the message.
Right.
That goes so far. People to share videos, people to share posts, people to say, hey, I like this guy, vote for this guy.
Yeah, I think one big thing to look at is check out the American Federation of Prosperity, check out their background, and then find out who they're supporting in this race. And you might have a different mindset of yourself. That's something that a lot of people, when you talk to them about it, they're like, what? Just take a look at it. I let them research on their own.
Absolutely.
I don't want to go negative. I just want people to know when they see AFP on a door hanger or a flyer, there's a reason.
What does that mean? Yep. What does that mean? Look into it, ladies and gentlemen. Do your duty. Your duty. Make sure you do your due diligence on all of the candidates. It's something that we here at Dion's Daily Dose firmly believe in. An educated voter is a dangerous voter. Dangerous to the establishment and dangerous to the people that want to take over. And they exist. So thank you very much, Spencer.
Thank you.
Again, a real pleasure. And we hope that if elected, you'll come and visit us again, maybe keep us filled in on what's going on downstate.
I'll be here the first week you want me here.
Awesome. Sounds great. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Spencer England. He's running for State Senate District 8, which is just to the east of us. Most of LaPorte counties, Marshall County, Starke County, etc. We wish him well. It was great sitting down with him. We got a lot of stuff coming up on the show, so make sure that you stay tuned. And matter of fact, in about 20 minutes, I have another show planned where we're going to talk about something. It's on there. I forgot actually what it is, but it's going to be interesting. We're going to have Sean and his brother, Ben Holmgren, who has not been on the show before. Actually, he was on years ago vocally, but he's going to put in an appearance. And we're going to discuss some things that affect us right here. As always, ladies and gentlemen, God bless you, God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America. I hope you have a wonderful evening.